Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and a very special welcome to Emily Hawkins, all the way coming in from Sunday evening in Georgia in the US. How are you, my friend?
I am great. I love Sundays. I don't know what you're talking about. I think Sundays are great. I get so much done on a Sunday.
Well, you're actually saying before we press record that Sunday is in fact your most productive day, and that's where you do a lot of the reflection, which I'd love to delve into today in terms of the process. Because I think what you are sharing has a lot of relevance for a lot of business people, not just leaders, but people if you want to increase your productivity. But before we jump into this, you were sharing with me that your family has some names that are very similar to mine.
That's right. My husband's name is Darren, and my son's name is Mitchell, which, by the way, is my mom's maiden name. So I think somehow you and I are related, which is fun.
Wow.
I'm just kidding. I have no idea. I feel like Mitchell's a pretty common name, but
Well,
um,
you got to wonder that, don't you? How far back does it go? Does that mean all of the Smiths and all the Joneses and all of the
if it's
Mitchells
the
are?
Smiths, then they like rule the world because I feel like
Yes.
there's tons of those. So
Absolutely, absolutely. So
yeah.
Emily, hey, we're going to talk a lot about productivity, effectiveness, improving sales process, and stuff like that today. But before we jump into some nitty-gritty questions, and I'm going to sound like a CBS reporter, can you just give us a little bit of background in terms of what you've done? I know you've been in corporate roles, and now you run a business. Your life, your coach. So you're working with small business owners and helping them to become more profitable, be able to leverage technology and leverage people. But
Mhm.
before we jump into all of that, I'd love to know a little bit about your background for the listeners in terms of what got you to what you're doing today.
Most definitely. So I spent 15 years in the corporate world. I have a degree in supply chain. When I was in college, I actually had a degree in logistics and transportation. Nobody knew what that was. I told people I was going to be an off-road trucker because they had no idea what that was. Then the word transportation. So they were like, I don't know what you do. So I used to mess with people about that. But I actually absolutely loved learning about streamlining processes and most of the papers and things I had to do in college were all related to what's the fastest, most efficient way that you can do X, Y, or Z.
Hmm.
And some of the things had to do with people, some had to do with processes, some had to do with systems. And it was just fascinating. I was like, this is a job. This is so cool. And so I got a degree in that and spent 15 years in the corporate world streamlining different businesses, worked for, my goodness, Walmart, worked for Target, all in the US. I worked with actually several different Toronto-based cell phone companies.
Okay.
I worked with Cricket. I worked with Bell South, which no longer exists. It was a landline company. And I worked with AT&T Mobility at the time. It was Singular. That's when they brought on the iPhone. That was fun.
Yeah.
I also worked for Carter's Baby Clothes. And so I worked in retail. I've pretty much done all the things from a supply chain, really streamlining all of the things. And I will tell you that I got so good at it that they gave me people to manage. And I thought that that was going to be amazing because I am a great doer. But I will tell you right now that great doer does not make good leader, uh, makes a piss poor leader. At least it did for me. I had what I will call a revolving door of people in and out of my office. I went through people like water. I don't know if you've ever heard, good help is hard to find. I used to say that. And
Yeah.
I hate that I used to say that because it's not actually true. And that, gosh, if people just cared as much as I did, everything would be better. No, that's not it either. So in 2015, I had my second child, and I came back from maternity leave early because my team was falling apart. Shocker. And so I decided to rule with an iron fist
Yeah,
and send out very harsh emails because that's how you lead people. Um,
that's
and
right.
these were terrible emails, by the way, like absolutely horrible. Didn't actually have face-to-face conversations with people, one-on-one, as a team, nothing. It was terrible. Um, Nothing changed. Everything got worse. Team was falling apart. So I started reading books because I was going to fix everyone around me because everyone else was the problem. I read 26 books in 2015 trying to figure out how to solve everyone else.
Mm.
Why did I read 26 books? Because, by the way, all of them are like, you are the problem, right? They don't say that though. They're like, you are the one that creates change. And I'm like, this book is crap. Let me
So
find
go to the
another book.
next book.
Yeah, next book, next. But I was picking things up. Like I was like, ooh, well, that's kind of interesting. There were little nuggets in each of them. But it took me until it was around this time in 2015 that all of it came together. And it actually came together in a fit of disgust. I had had a meeting with my team. Nobody's doing what they should be doing. I walk in my office, I shut the door, and I'm like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a document. It's going to be the dream employee. So I pull up this document and I write dream employee and I start writing, they will never be late. They will never blah, blah, blah. And I was like three never sentences in, I was like, wait, well, this is just a bunch of things I don't want.
Yeah.
That's not a dream, right? So I deleted everything out and I was like, oh, this is gonna be harder than we thought. So then I was like, well, what would these people say? How would we interact? And I just start writing like conversations we would have, how they would be like, gosh, there aren't enough hours in the day because of, I just love what I'm doing. They'd be passionate about it. They'd be bringing ideas to me. We would have these awesome brainstorming sessions. And I wrote 2 pages, 2 pages of just pure gold for what I felt like this team would be. And I was so excited for about 2.5 seconds until I looked at it and realized if those people showed up, was I the right person to lead them? And the answer was no, I
Yeah.
was not. And that's when the books kicked in. That's when it was like, oh, wait a minute. Now I see the problem, right? Now I see if I actually lead the way I know in my gut, I should be doing this because I was to that point, I was emulating everyone around me.
Yeah.
I had some really great bosses, and so I was going to be them. Except I wasn't. And I thought, let me do it my way. What's wrong with doing it my way? I've read all these books and I've got all these great tools. What if I did it that way? I mean,
Mm.
it really can't get worse at this point. So I changed everything. I put a couple people on performance improvement plans. My rock star on the team left. Of course she did. I would have too. The situation was dire. But then it gave me the opportunity to find this dream team, which by the way showed up. It was
Yeah.
magic. I truly believe when you put out into the world with clarity what you want, you will get it. Um, but then I decided with this new group of people, it was like half the team, basically, I was able to sort of rehire. Um, I decided I was onboarding the whole team. So I told everyone, I was like, Monday morning, the team, the new people will be here and we're all going to be day one. It's going to be like we've never worked together. And I had every group in the organization come around for about an hour and talk about what they loved, what they hated, how they interacted with my team. And I was like, what's great about this is that none of us have hard feelings because we've
Mm.
never worked here before. Um, the people that were on my team previous were like, this is exceptional. Like, I wish we had done this when I started. And I said, and that's my fault. And I'm so sorry. And
Mm.
it's going to be better. So I still sent emails, but I never sent anything harsh in an email. That's pointless. From then on, everything was face to face. It was supportive. It was, how can we grow this
Yeah.
organization? So within 90 days, we became the most productive team in the company. And then I got bored because I had solved everything. And my team said, you should be a life coach because the way you interact with us is like a life coach. Now, mind you, I have a degree in supply chain. I have an MBA in global business. That was woo-woo BS. That was not real. So I was like, I'm not getting that. I have 2 business degrees. And but enough people said it. And I feel like if enough people say things that you can't just say no or never. I don't like when people say always or never. I think those are like really intense words.
Yeah.
And so I thought, "Ugh, let me just explore this." So I ended up I became a board certified life coach with the Tony Robbins organization because they had the certification. And it was like a fish finding water. I feel like when I was in school and I was learning about processes and systems and all of that, we touched a little on people, but not nearly enough. And
Mm,
I feel like that was really the missing piece that I've been able to carry over and help businesses and myself and all the things. And now I've worked with over 2,500 people and businesses, and I was featured in Forbes in 2020. And I feel like I'm just getting started.
mm.
And it's been such a fun ride. And it was all built on me being a bad leader. So, yeah,
Rising out of the ashes.
100%, 100%.
So Emily, there's a lot in it, and thank you for sharing that background. And I think as you were talking, I'm thinking to myself, tick, 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 because there's a lot of leaders that go through very, very similar processes and I guess procedures where they don't necessarily have the transition plan when they're promoted. They're
Mhm.
anointed as a leader because they're a fantastic individual contributor, or they've got some connection with a senior leader who needs not so much a favor, but somebody on their side. And so
Mhm.
they're thrust into that position, but not necessarily given the support because, as you rightly found out, the skill set required to be an individual contributor as compared to being a leader of individual contributors is fundamentally different.
So
And,
different.
and when you were talking about, well, I used to send out emails, and that I don't know about having one-on-ones. We just send an email. You need to do this. I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? In 2024, there are leaders in organizations that think that is the way to lead their teams, and they wonder why they've got dysfunction that sits within their organization.
It's so true. I actually had a leader a couple weeks ago doing this. They were saying to me, you and I were talking before about I put together this I call it weekly goals, and I do it every Sunday, and it's scheduled to go out on Mondays because I'm not bothering people on the
Mm,
weekends. Well, I teach this to the businesses that I work with, and he came to our session that we had that week, and he was pissed. He's like, nobody's reading this email. And I was like, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm sending another email. I was like, but if they're not reading the email, what makes you think they're going to read yet another email? So I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to have a listening tour this week.
mm,
I want you to go around, don't call people if they're all local. Just look at them face to face in the eye. Don't make a meeting. I don't want it to be that formal. And just have a conversation. Hey, so what's going on about the weekly goals? Or, what's preventing you
mm,
from responding to this? That's all I told him to ask. Within, oh my goodness, 6 hours of us talking, we had a solution.
mm.
Nobody checked their emails, not his emails or any emails. And we actually ended up implementing Slack. We did it the rest of that week. Slack's so easy to implement. It was
Yeah.
great. And everyone loves it. And guess what? Everything gets done now.
Mm.
And it was just amazing. It was like just asking the right question and having that face-to-face conversation.
It's it's sometimes the simplest things, isn't it, that you implement. And one of the things that I'm big on is visibility and working with leaders, trying to encourage them to have time with their team. And whether that's
Mhm.
one-on-one or, as you said, just doing listening tours, just spending time with them because there are so many leaders that lead by absence, and their team are thinking, "Oh, where's my manager? Oh, they're off, navel gazing again, or they're off strategizing, or off forecasting, whatever the case might be." They
Mhm.
just want to know that you're there, that you care about them. And if you show that, then they're more likely to increase their discretionary effort, which increases productivity, their engagement, and everything flows from that. One thing I did want to ask you, you've said in 2015, as well as having a second child, you're reading 26 books.
Yeah.
And in that process, you think, oh, I'll get to the next book because it sounded like you were searching for the answer and hoping that the answer was going to be outside of you as to the elixir for leadership, and you realize that it was you. Um, when you now work with organizations and when you work with leaders who perhaps have had a similar, not so much a similar background, but a similar introduction to leadership, they've been thrust into the role.
Mhm.
Um, and they recognize, oh, my team doesn't do this, and it's all the negative talk.
Mhm.
Um, how did you, what was there a specific thing that came up through that time? Was there a specific thing that happened at work, or was there a specific thing you saw as a theme through those books that said, you know what, it's actually me, and that was the thing that changed everything?
So yes, every book in some way, shape, or form said it was me, right? Most of them were like, you have the power to change things in your life. And that sounded really empowering because I was like,
Mm,
right, I have people that I want to change. So I was coming at it from the wrong angle, right? But I encountered this one book. I think it's called The Wisdom of Oz. And it was
okay.
one of the first books I read. And what I loved about this specific book is it said that negative emotions were okay. And I feel like that me telling you that I was frustrated by this team is something we're not supposed to talk about. Like you're only supposed to talk success and happiness and rainbows, when in reality was not that, right? And what I loved about this, and I actually incorporated into what I teach people, is the book does not say this. This is my words. After having an MBA, I feel like I should use some big MBA words here. I think we should embrace the suck. Uh, and so, what I teach people is most leaders that I talk to start to say something negative and then they pull back and they're like,
Mm,
but I love my team, but I love blah, blah. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm sure these are wonderful people. Let's have 5 minutes on the clock. 5 minutes is longer than you think, and embrace the suck. And
mm,
blame the government, blame your parents. I don't care. It does not matter. Fully feel how frustrating this is. Because I feel like if we don't fully feel that emotion, it's really hard to get out of it. And if we
mm,
don't get out of it, then we just stay in this loop of like blame and nothing happens there. Nothing happens. And it's amazing how much 5 minutes can just help you feel that. And most people start to realize, but I realize this is kind of dumb. Like they start coaching themselves and they're like, except I really didn't give them enough on this,
mm,
or except blah, blah, blah. And then they start seeing their own ownership in it. And they're like, I'm the problem, aren't I? And I said, but that's so freeing because it also means that you are the solution.
yeah.
And so let's be a part of the solution. And I don't let them focus or shame themselves because that also doesn't help.
Mm.
But once they see that they have just one little, it's like, yes, let's grab on to you do have ownership in this, and that's positive and it's good. So that's typically what we do.
Interesting. Again, because there'll be some people that are listening to this and they think, well, that's all well and good, Emily, but you don't understand. I work in a company that we are so dysfunctional. We've got so many different silos. I can say to myself, hey, I'm taking full responsibility. I can empower my team to take full responsibility. But we're dealing with so many different departments within our business and so many different layers of leadership. They've all got different messages. We're not on the same page. How do I become empowered in that sort of organization where I've got my manager, all right? And me as a leader, I've got my manager who is an old school, doesn't like to have the conversation, doesn't use a thing called empathy, doesn't believe in the thing called trust. You're my subordinate, so get shit done, right?
Yep.
How do I work in that sort of organization? Because I'm sure, and I'm talking from personal experience here, it does wear you down over time. You think, well,
Mhm.
what do I have control over and what impact can I make? I'm recognizing that I am, I guess, the cause of the issues in many cases, but also the possible solution. But how do you work with then people who perhaps don't have the support in an organization or have this level of dysfunction and they can see the light, but others around them can't?
Okay, you just described the company that I was a part of before I left the corporate world to a T. So that was interesting. I think you've been following me around. My boss also was allergic to the word we. It was only I. I am doing this, I am doing that. And I thought that was so interesting as a leader to not use the word we,
Mm,
because there is no I anymore. And so what I realized was I needed to be the support that my team needed. So I was fortunate enough to have an office with doors, and we would have our team meetings in my office. And I had a couple satellite people too, so they would call in, but we had a what I called a safe space. And I was like, you can come in here, you can complain about anybody in this company, you can complain about our clients, our vendors. I don't care. But what we're going to do is we're going to, one, keep it in this room, and two, we're going to find a solution. So you bring the complaint, and then we're going to brainstorm it and we're going to fix it. And it became so popular that our staff meetings, everybody brought a highlight and a low light. And it was fun. Like you won something if you had the best low light, by the way. Because I wanted it to be a place where people could talk about having the worst client or having the worst whatever. And then for all of us to solution it out together, it ended up creating depth and breadth in the team. But what was interesting is those very people started telling other people in the company that I was a safe place to come.
mm,
And so slowly but surely, I started to have an effect on other areas in the organization, even knowing we were very siloed,
mm,
even knowing I didn't have C in my title. Um, it didn't matter. You can lead from anywhere. If you show that you're willing to be a solution person, most people will follow you. I also used to do this thing. Now, this is kind of gutsy, so you don't have to do this, but I would walk into meetings where everything was very tense and they're looking for somebody to blame. And I would be like, I'm your guy. Blame me. Now, let's move on. Like, how are we fixing this? Blame me, put it in the notes, whatever, put it in my record. I don't care.
yeah.
How are we fixing it? And it's amazing how much that would diffuse situations because people would want to go find somebody else to blame. And then they're like, they'd realize how dumb it was. And it was like,
Mm.
oh, wait, really, we care about what the solution is. And that changed a lot. So it was really exciting. One person really can make a difference. I can tell you that right now. Because I witnessed it. And it was when I personally shifted.
Mm.
And I felt the same. I felt like I didn't have any power. And then slowly but surely, by just putting out what I really wanted, it showed up.
And that points then to, and I talk a lot about this to leaders, what do you stand for? What are your metrics of excellence? What are your standards of excellence? What are your values, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how do we define you as a leader? And one of the first things that a good leader does, an exceptional leader does, is they always take responsibility, irrespective of whether they are at fault or not. Because at least
Mm-hmm.
when they take responsibility, they've got some more choices in terms of how they choose to respond, right? And
Exactly.
as you were talking there, I'm thinking, yeah, it's fascinating how no matter whether you're in Georgia, whether you're probably in New York or Sydney or Melbourne, Australia or South Africa, there's a lot of people that like to point the blame and looking for somebody else or something else to justify why we're in the position that we are or why we can't do this or we can't get these results. The moment we take responsibility, literally everything changes because at least we've now got an opportunity to move forward and use that as a platform for
Mhm.
progress.
100%.
Mm,
And another thing I will tell you that I do on a regular basis is, and I did this with my team in the corporate world too, is I would say, y'all, I'm the dumbest person sitting in this room. The ideas that I have are not real well thought out. I'm going to throw out an idea. If y'all just say yes, that's not a real answer to me.
yeah,
A real answer is poking holes in it, asking questions, fleshing it out with me. Play. Let's play together on this.
yeah.
And I'm always amazed when I bring somebody new in, they're always timid. And then they start to see that, no, this is actually real.
Mm,
But that is something that happens over time. But it's so important because the greatest ideas never come from me. They never come from me. And I'm so happy about that. Otherwise, I'd be really poor. So,
mm. It reminds me, John Maxwell talks about that a lot in terms of he puts an idea out, but if he finishes the meeting or a session where the idea doesn't get improved, then that's not a good position to be in because it's always the idea that needs to be focused on, and it doesn't matter who comes up or who improves it. It's the fact that the idea is the winner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Nice. So let's then pivot then and talk about in a highly competitive environment, which most businesses are operating in today, times of pressure, cost of living, interest rates going through the roof, competition,
Mhm.
being manic and trying to win at all costs and all sorts of stuff. Just look at the US election right coming up.
Yeah, I'm gonna fall asleep and hope to wake up on Wednesday. So
That is insane. Because I know you work a lot in the productivity space and helping leaders and helping their teams become more productive.
Mhm.
Let's just talk about some key things, certainly from a leader's point of view, in terms of what we can do to improve our productivity as a team, whether it be sales process, efficiencies. You mentioned before we jumped on, you got a process you use with Slack. Now, we don't necessarily have to talk specifically around Slack, or we could, but
Right.
I'm really
Mhm.
looking for, I guess, the methodology behind the application. So
Mhm.
thinking about we've got a team here that might be behind in their target. We're in a highly competitive environment. We may not necessarily have everybody on the same page. There still might be this theme of like blame culture or not really taking full ownership, relying heavily on the leader to do things, and the leader sometimes comes in and like the person on the white horse says, "Let me solve the problem." Um, some ideas that you've put in place and you're using with your organizations you're working with today to make some change in the right areas to help smooth out some of these challenges, to make it more productive, to increase things like engagement. What are some key things, some key strategies that you work on?
Well, you mentioned a lot of scary things, by the way, before you led into that, like the world is ending, basically like zombie apocalypse. How do you manage a team when they're in that? Well, what I will say first is I have a truly unsexy word, and it's stability,
Yep.
stable. And I love stable. I mean, I'm sitting in a house right now that is stable because it's got a great firm foundation. And that's really what we're missing, especially in the US, is a lot of stability, something that we can lean on and feel safe and secure. Because if you do not feel safe, you do not feel secure, then you are living in fight or flight. If you're living
Mm,
in fight or flight, your brain, it actually has a logical part of it that shuts down. And fight or flight is run away from the bear, get away from the snake. It's not where we're going to create a 12-month plan of doing something. There's no long-term thinking. There's no
mm,
cause and effect. It's just run, right? So the reason why creating a stable environment is so crucial is because your team needs a place to feel like it can calm down for a second, the pit in the stomach can go away, and then all of a sudden, this logical part of your brain kicks in, and it brings right along with it a lot of creativity, a lot of
mm,
innovation. So I'm really, really big. I love an acronym, and I want to share this acronym because I feel like it's really crucial to building this foundation of stability that every organization needs, especially if you have a toxic work environment. It's
yeah.
literally what I put in place when I had to rebuild my team, and we became the most productive in the company. So the first letter is S, and it's seen. And what I want you to do here is I want you to see your team, see your people. What does this mean? So I think we've all been in meetings where a boss is like, "Come talk to me. Let's talk about what's bothering you. I'll give you I'll help you, I'll support you." And you say something like, "Well, every time I send this message to this one group, I never hear back, and it would be great if you could just chime in or be a part of the meetings." And they're like,
Mm.
"I'll be there next week." And they never show up. And you're like, "Wow, thanks for that support." They're all talk and no action. And all of a sudden, you're like, I don't feel seen, right? Whereas I think it's amazing when you have a leader that hears that you're in the kitchen and you're like, "Gosh, this coffee is so terrible." And the next week they bring coffee in for everybody and they're like, I know our coffee sucks, so I thought I'd bring us all coffee. Like, it's so small, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh, they were listening to me. They heard me. It goes such a long way. And when you do that and you help people feel seen, they want to show up for you
Mm.
more. So to me, that's really key. But the next one is T, which is trust. And what I want you to do here is trust that your team will do exceptional work. Don't do it for them.
Yeah.
Don't micromanage them. Trust that they know what they're doing and that you are fully supporting them by having regular conversations with them, saying, hey, if you ever need anything, put a message on Slack, instant message me, send me a text, whatever it is. And then providing them with standard operating procedures or something of what success looks like.
Mm.
And then trust that they are the right people to do that. And another thing is also showing them trust, meaning show up to meetings on time, do what you say, follow through. I feel like if you don't do that, then all of a sudden it becomes, oh yeah, they say a lot, but they don't actually follow through. They don't do those things.
Who would have
So
thought,
then,
eh? Who would
yeah,
have thought
exactly.
this?
I think we've all been there, right? We know these people, unfortunately. But the
Yes.
best thing is you might know these people, but you don't have to become them.
Mm.
And that's so beautiful. The next one is ability. So when I was a leader, especially in the early days going from doer to leader, I didn't know that I didn't have to go to all the meetings on my calendar. I could delegate somebody on my team to go to a meeting for me and tell me about that meeting. And they felt like it was the greatest thing ever. And I had fewer meetings to go to.
Yeah.
So why not start trusting in their ability and sharing that responsibility? Hey, I know that you're looking for a new challenge. I have this meeting every Wednesday that it's really hard for me to go to. If you would go to that meeting and then give me a summary of what happened and be, our delegate, that would be amazing. They start to feel better. And then another thing, especially in these toxic environments, we talk about gossip, right? A lot of gossip in toxic environments. So I want you to gossip too, but I want you to spin it on its head. And I want you to do productive gossip. And what this is I'm at the water cooler and I'm talking about Darren. Man, I was in a meeting with Darren last week and he saved the day. He had the best comeback for criticism that our client was giving us. And if Darren hadn't have been there, I don't know what would have happened. We're so lucky that Darren's on the team. You're not telling Darren that, you're telling somebody else,
Yeah.
but it's going to get back to you. And that's awesome. I
Yeah.
want it to. I feel like that's huge when you hear something about yourself and it's
Yeah.
good, you
Yeah.
just feel so much better. Like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something right.
Absolutely. But it has to be genuine, right? So you're not saying make something up, but it has to be genuine.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to talk about all the negative stuff, but
100%.
it's so empowering when you talk about the really good things. And it doesn't have to be big. It just could be small things, but it makes a mark. Definitely makes a mark.
In fact, the smaller the better,
Yeah.
but it's got to be specific.
Yeah.
So if let's use this example again, where I'm talking about you to somebody else and I say, man, Darren's awesome. Okay. That is not helpful. Or, I mean, do you like him? Do you want to date him? Like, what do you mean by that? I don't know. Um, but if you're specific and you're like, Darren is awesome because he brought me coffee into that meeting because he knows I love coffee. And I just
Yeah.
thought that was really special.
Yeah.
That's nice. That is specific and you know what it's about.
Plus your
Uh,
favorite chocolate biscuit.
what was that?
Plus your favorite chocolate biscuit.
Oh, then we're really good friends. Like, yes, that is an amazing move. That's a power move right there, is what that is. To dunk it in. It's got to be one that when you dunk
That's
in
right.
it, perfect. Yeah, yeah, we are best friends now. Um, the next one is boundaries. So B is boundaries. In toxic environments, there are no boundaries. You
Mm,
work 24/7. Um, Everything is, oh, it's the last minute. We got to get this thing done. It's an all-nighter. I just don't think that anything is that urgent. I
no.
don't. And so I like to think there's a couple things with boundaries here. One is honoring people's boundaries and only having them work hours, which means you as the leader have to plan ahead.
Mm,
So if your boss says something needs to be due on Wednesday, then for your team, it probably needs to be due on Monday, which means they need to know about it the week before, and so on
yeah.
and so forth. So there's that piece, but there's another piece that we don't talk about enough, which is I think Darren's a rock star. So I'm going to promote Darren. I'm going to start throwing more projects at Darren without talking to him first,
Mm,
without asking if that's what he wants. I actually did this to somebody named Rachel. I will forever be sad about this situation. She was amazing. She was a rock star. And so I was like, well, she reminds me of myself. So she must want what I
mm,
want, which is to move up the ladder. So I started throwing more projects at her. I started including her in more. She came into my office one day, tears in her eyes. I quit. You want too much out of me. It's never enough. I never had the conversation with her about
wow.
grooming her and how awesome she was with what she was doing. And come to find out, she and her wife were trying to get pregnant
Yeah.
and she was wanting a stable job and not move up.
Yeah.
But I never asked. And so that's a boundaries problem.
Yeah.
Um, Assuming that people want what you want.
Yes.
So that's huge. The next one is love, which we don't talk about at work enough because that seems like a dangerous word, except it's not. And I feel like our form of love is different. Everybody's form of love is different.
Mm,
And I don't know if you remember the book, I think it was popular in like the late 90s, The Five Love Languages. I
yeah.
love this book. I think it's amazing. It was not one of the 26 books I read, by the way. I read this before. And I love the five love languages. I think for work, though, really only four apply because I think physical touch, just, I don't know. I don't think it's very smart. Leave hugs at home, as great as they are. Um, but there are some that resonate more with your team than others. Find out what that is. So
Mm,
I am a words of affirmation person. I know that's shocking, but I love to tell people how great they are. I love to send notes, handwritten notes, emails. That falls short on a lot of people. A lot of people are acts of service people, meaning I'm going to be out of town. Will you take over my workload? I need you in a meeting to help me tag team
mm,
this client.
yeah.
That's acts of service. So find out what your specific team's love language is, and maybe don't call it that because I think that might freak people out. You can just give them sentences and say,
Mm,
like, which one you can rank these. I love being publicly announced, that I've done something well. That would be words of affirmation. I love meetings with you one-on-one, meetings, outings with the team. That's quality time. I love when a favorite thing is put on my desk, a little
mm,
candy bar, movie tickets. That's gifts.
yeah.
And then, of course, the acts of service that we were talking about before. Find out what that is
Yeah.
and then speak that specific dialect to your team or the people on your team directly.
I think that's really important. And it's similar. You can weave into that personal styles, communication styles, behavior styles, all the profiling tools that are out there. Really just gets to know your team, gets to know your people. And if you go back to the first one, seen, be visible. Um, and the best way to be visible is to be there in the presence and give the greatest gift you can, which is the gift of your attention, so that you can learn that, right? So you don't have to get them to do surveys. You can actually observe that and through that get an understanding of what is the best way to communicate with Emily. What does she respond to? What does she what doesn't she respond to? And adjust accordingly. Because the other part of this, of course, is sometimes leaders try to treat everybody the same way, and often they'll treat somebody the way they've been treated. And
Mhm.
you've got to be adjustable. You literally have to be a chameleon with leadership.
There's this really neat picture that I've seen on social media, and it's all of these matches that are on fire, like they're burning, and then the one that like stops so that the other matches don't burn. And I feel like what you're doing is that, right? You're interrupting
Mm.
the pattern.
Yeah.
So in the job that I had before I left the corporate world, I had a horrible boss. He would take credit for my work. He would, like I said, he was allergic to we. He said I all the time. And it just pissed me off. But then I realized, but that's not productive. It's not
Yeah.
solving anything. So I just decided to be, Nelson Mandela, be the change in the world I wish to see. Or was it Gandhi who said that? I think it was Gandhi. Anyway, these like really great people said this. And so I started leading the team the way I wanted to be led, how
Yeah.
I wanted to be led. And that was, to your point, being seen and heard and valued for my ideas. And by the way, the weekly goals that we were talking about before, that stinted from that specific boss.
Yeah.
Because I thought, wouldn't it be great if on a weekly basis I knew where I stood? Like I understood what success for that week looked like. Of course, there are other things that need to be done on a weekly basis, but what's the goal this week? If we
Mm.
got this done, what would that look like? So I started sending that to my team on a weekly basis called weekly goals. And then I realized I'm going to CC my boss so that my team didn't know because I didn't want it to be like they thought they were being checked on because it had nothing to
Mm.
do with that. And then I thought, what if I send it to my COO and I blind copy him? So nobody knows who's getting this email. Well, all of a sudden, the COO is sending me messages every week. Beauty is what he would say. Like, that's all he would reply. And he's like, I love your messages because I literally have a dashboard of what's happening in your specific portal of the world. And I can sit in meetings. We were the largest cost center in this company. So
Okay.
he had a pulse on that and
Yeah.
could sit in meetings and know what was going on. Meanwhile, my boss would come running down the hall, pissed off about something, and I would be like, I sent that to you last week. It was in the weekly goals email. Go check. So that was always fun. So it was really out of spite, which is terrible. But I mean, everybody was happy. Everybody had the information they needed. And I thought for a while, I started to get in my head and I said to my team, like, is this too much? And they were all like, oh my gosh, I print this out. I stick it on my desk. Like that's my go-to. That's my
Yeah.
North Star. And I was like, okay, good. Then it is for me too. And my team now, same, operates beautifully this way.
Nice. Nice.
And I should say the final one, by the way, in the stable is enjoyment.
Yeah.
Enjoying where you work, having fun. When I was a child, um, I remember distinctly, I was like maybe 4. And my brother and I were talking about our mother and how unfun she was. And my brother said, I mean, you're a girl. So one day you're going to be a mom. So that makes you unfun too. And I just sat there and bawled my eyes out. Like, I don't want to be unfun. And odd enough, that conversation just stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I was like, I will be fun. I will be fun if it kills me. Now, being a mother of 2 and the one that makes sure that everyone brushes their teeth, that's not, but it's necessary. I want my children to have teeth, forever. So it's kind of a big deal. But for a team, you can have jokes, you can play around, you can have funny conversations. You don't have to like rule with an iron fist.
Mm.
Something we recently implemented that's been really fun is on our Slack channel. You could do this anywhere you want. We just happen to use Slack, but we have a Slack channel called Pebbling. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term pebbling. It's what you do with a friend. You don't even know you're doing it, but there's actually a term for it. So you see a funny meme on social media and you send it to your friend and you're like, oh my God, this reminded me of blah, 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 right? Or you send them a reel that you've seen on Instagram. Well,
Yeah.
that is called pebbling. And so I thought, well, why don't we do this in our team? So we have a Pebbled channel and it's funny memes and reels and things that we see, not necessarily work related, just
Yeah.
anything we think is funny. And it's really fun how we like banter back and forth with each other on it.
Because that points to the enjoyment component as well. But you can probably only do that if you've got the rest of the pieces of the puzzle in place.
Yes,
And that's the key thing we need
100%.
to make people aware of. You want to have a fun environment, but a fun environment without structure is leads to dysfunction. and leads to less than optimal performance.
It's like the fun uncle, right? Like the fun uncle who has no responsibility and brings you candy, comes in a couple times a year, you go to Disney World or something, and then they leave.
Yeah,
That's not, you don't really have respect for the fun uncle, right? So I love that you said that because you don't want to be the fun uncle. You want to be the person that people respect, and then they're like, and they're fun, and
yeah,
I enjoy being around this person.
yeah, yeah. So I think as a leader, that's I like that acronym from Stable. Be seen, build trust, don't micromanage, have ability, but also part of that is look for opportunities where you can enhance people's abilities, give them delegation authority, give them opportunities to expand, but make sure we've got boundaries in place. So, what does good look like? What does excellence look like? And be really stringent around that, which means you've got to have some standards in place. L, love, and we're not talking about hugging, but know the styles, know the communication styles, know what makes people tick. And as a leader, give people responsibilities and roles and opportunities that fit their, I guess, their recognition style, their
100%.
level of appetite for growth, etc., etc., and then have fun, right? Because how many, and I know when I go into some corporates, you walk into some of these environments and it's like walking into a morgue. There's energy that's just like they just drain the energy and it's cold. It's cold.
Mhm.
Thank you. Who would want to work here?
Exactly, exactly. I'm like, they must have some crazy benefits. Like, I don't know what they are, but free health
Well,
insurance isn't worth that much. So,
it's either that or it's a case of, well, I can't leave because I've been here for 25 years, and if I
oh,
leave now, I'll lose all my benefits.
I'm going down with the ship. Ugh.
Oh man, man. Hey, Emily, I wanted to sort of bring this in to a bit of a close, and we talked before, and we've touched on this as we've gone through, but can you spend just a few minutes just talking about your methodology on a Sunday? Because when you were talking about this, I wrote down the word reflection.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I work with all my clients on, particularly leaders, to think about, okay, you need to dedicate some time to reflect on the week
Hmm.
that's just been, what worked, what didn't work, what are the themes, what are you happy with, what are the wins, etc. But also to start thinking about, well, what can you now focus on for the next week? And I love your process of doing it 1 week at a time. And particularly in sales teams, we can sometimes get so caught up in, well, we've got this mammoth target we've got to hit. It's so far out. It's like next quarter, the quarter after that, it's the full year. Breaking it back down into, okay, what can we do this week? And how can we reflect and measure how we're progressing, so
Hmm.
that we can repeat over time, make some continual improvements, and then give ourselves every opportunity of hitting the number. Can you just talk through I guess the methodology and how you found that not only really productive for yourself, but
Hmm.
what the benefits are now for the clients that you are working with? Because I think this topic is easy to not do,
Oh,
but
so
it
easy
can
to do.
be the difference that makes all the difference.
100%. So Sunday mornings, I wake up before everyone else and I pour myself a nice cup of coffee because that's what I love, but you can choose whatever you want. No one is around. I have no pressure. And the reason why I'm mentioning this specific part is if you try to do it on a Friday, that's usually when you're trying to catch up on things like, oh, let me finish this one more thing. Let me get this last email out. And then all of a sudden you don't do the thing. Well, on Monday, your week has already started. And
Mm,
so you're already behind the eight ball, and my phone is ringing, and people need me, and you have no place to focus. So, Sunday to me is such a sacred time because nobody needs me, nobody's bothering me. And I feel like that gets me truly out of reactionary mode and into reflection mode. And so the first thing I do is pull up my calendar from the week before and I just look and I
mhm,
see what happened. And I was joking earlier that there are weeks where you feel like there's a car crash, right? You're like, that was horrible. And if it was truly a car crash, you don't remember what happened. So it's really important to look back and remember why you feel this way. So what's great is nobody's going to see this. It is for you and you alone.
mm.
How did the week go? Was it you felt hurried, you felt rushed, you felt like you were always behind the eight ball, or where you're like, gosh, it was so great. I was so prepared. Everything went really well. Meetings were shorter than I thought they were going to be. They were more productive. Whatever it is, be real with yourself
Mm,
because I either want you to repeat it because it was great or like get rid of some of that stuff.
yeah.
And so sit with it, be real with yourself, and then decide how you want this next week to go. And look at, for me, I have what I call anchors in my week. There are certain things that come hell or high water are happening. For me, I get up every day and I write in a journal for about 5 minutes. It's, I mean, I don't think anybody will ever read this. I always think of these fancy journals that people, like really famous people, they like publish their journals. And I seriously laugh that if mine were ever published, they'd be like, maybe she had a drinking problem. Like, I'm not sure. None of this makes sense. Anyway, it would not be a bestseller, but it doesn't matter. It sort of gets the cobwebs out of my head and gets me going for the day. And I find when I do that, that I'm a little more grounded and centered. So that is an
Mhm.
anchor for me. Something else I do is I work out every day. It's different on different days of the week. So I
Yeah.
just make sure that those anchors are there. Then I look at what my goals are for my team. And again, I'm only looking at a week. And let's say there are a bunch of meetings scheduled on my calendar this week. Well, I'm not going to put a bunch of heavy goal setting for the week because my time to actually get those heads down work time is not really there this week. So I'll be a little more light on what we need to accomplish as a team. But what's so great about this is, first of all, I look at the week, I say, what do I want to accomplish? Then I say, who on my team is going to help me with this?
Mm,
And that when I do this, when I send this to my team through a Slack channel, I schedule it for 8 a.m. on Monday morning. Um, I have my entire schedule listed out. I do this for a couple of reasons. One, so they know what I'm doing, so that they're aware that I'm on a podcast, I'm working with these clients, I'm doing this kind of thing. I just think that's important for somebody that's in a business to know what's happening in the
mm,
business. If they need me, when they can schedule time with me as well. That's really important. But also, I have all of our projects and how they fit into those projects. So I'm looking for Erin she's our data analytics, head of data analytics, to help me build out this dashboard for one of our clients. And I'm looking for these three components of the dashboard. I'm not necessarily going to build out the entire dashboard
mm.
this week. Let's just make sure we can find the data, it feeds properly on that specific piece. Next week, we'll move to this.
Yeah.
And then just making sure that everybody's got that little chunk. So this isn't all of their daily activities. They know what their daily activities are. These are like, here's what would be awesome if we could have accomplished by the end of the week. And what's great
Mm,
is I've been doing this for, gosh, like 15 years at this point with so many teams that I make it so that things are simple. Like, oh, well, I can do that.
mm.
Right. So you will. And because you do, you end up doing just a little more. And then by the end of the year, my goal with this is to move the business 1% a week. So that 52%, we've moved
Yeah.
52% by the end of the year.
I love it.
But it does
And
start with my feelings first and my reflection first. Because if I don't do that as the leader, I don't know if I can swear on this, but poop
you
rolls
can.
downhill. Okay, well, shit rolls downhill. So,
shit, you can say that shit rolls
okay,
down.
I wasn't sure. So, if I don't feel good, then that just compounds and it gets worse. And
Yeah.
so, if I plan the week that I know I'll be most productive in, most likely it's going to help everyone else.
And with that, what you're not saying, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing you saying is you have to plan what the key priorities are going to be so that we give ourselves the opportunity of moving that 1 percentage point per week, but also be conscious of the fact that things happen, can happen, and will happen, and do happen throughout the week. So there needs to be some flexibility that we don't overload our team members with so much stuff that they've just got no time to do anything else other than what you've
Right.
set. So these are guideposts, right? These are principles that we need
Exactly.
to work on. And so the reflection next week is probably going to be a fact of, okay, how did that week go? Did we set some of those goals too high? Were there other things that came in and maybe took priority? Were there some things that we didn't even forecast that we just had to put all hands to the pump? And that's okay, Because if you
Hmm.
don't do that on a weekly basis, and I love the fact that you've broken up into weekly, you can get so overwhelmed because one week molds into the next, and 3 months all of a sudden goes by and look back and think, oh my God, what's happened? How do we end
Hmm.
up here? Well, you end up here because you didn't plan and you didn't have the
Right.
discipline to stay to the plan.
Exactly. And what I love, I was doing this with a client last week, and I always make my clients share their screen and do the thing because I can talk about it, I can build it for them, but it's not the same. So I said, okay, go into Outlook because they use Outlook and pull up your calendar. Well, they had it on the month view. And
Okay.
he was like, see how overwhelming this is? I was like, right. So change it to a week. And he was like, oh, this is so much better. And I was like, it really is. Like, it's really that simple. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, you're like, oh, yeah, let me just look at this period of time, not what am I doing for the quarter, the month.
Yeah.
Ugh. By
Yeah.
the way, anybody's calendar at a monthly view is not pretty. Don't look at your
No,
calendar on a monthly basis. It's
no,
awful.
no. And so with that, and we'll wrap it up with this, is that you can take a week, but then if you focus on, okay, what can I do now? I know what my plan is.
Hmm.
What do I need to do now? So this is coming back to being fully present in the moment and thinking about where is the best use of my time, and certainly as a leader to drive the team forward, to give them what they need, to hopefully give ourselves every opportunity of making progress, so we can
Hmm.
hit those goals. So if there's one thing as we bring this to a close, Emily, that you wanted to leave people with, that would be, I don't know, just a piece of gold or some
Hmm.
advice or some guidance that might help them along their journey because they might be hopefully resonating with a lot of what we've talked about today in terms of some dysfunction and not necessarily having, great leaders above that are empathizing and talking about the we. It's all about I. What's
Hmm.
one thing, certainly as we approach the end of the year, whether it be to finish off the year strongly or at least give ourselves a good platform for 2025, that you're
Hmm.
kind of thinking about now and maybe talking to your clients about?
Well, I'm such a fan of now, the present moment. Something that I literally write every day in my journal. It's how I finish. The last sentence I write every single morning is I forgive my past, I release my future, and I honor how I feel in the present moment. The present moment is all you have. I feel like in business, back to the finger pointing, that's focusing on the past.
Mm,
And if you're planning for the quarter, that's focusing on the future. But what about right now? So if you're listening to this, what is something you can do today? Just today, not tomorrow, not anything. What is one thing you can do today that moves the needle for your business? It saves money, it increases revenue, or it saves time.
mm,
Any of those things, one thing. What is the one thing that you can do right now? So you turn off this podcast and you go do that one thing. Not again, not tomorrow, not
mm,
later. I want you to do it right now. Because what will happen, you know what it is. This should not take any time to figure out. You will get what's so beautiful, and it's called momentum. Because when we do one thing, we want to do something else and we want to
yeah,
do more and more and more. And that's the goal. So
yeah,
go find that one thing and do that one thing. And it's probably something you've been putting off. So go do that because you know it's going to have a huge change in your business and
yeah,
for your team.
yeah. 100%. 100%. Love it. Hey, this has been a great conversation. Even on a Sunday evening for you,
Yeah.
you're in fine form. Where can people connect with you? Where they want to know more about what you do? Where's the best place for them to get some more information and connect with you, Emily?
So my website is Emily Hawkins, the number four, the letter U.com. Somewhere in the world, there is an emilyhawkins.com that I'm sure is wonderful, but somebody else owns it. So I am Emily Hawkins, the number four, the letter U.com. And I am Emily Hawkins for you on all social platforms as well. So you can easily find me. I love LinkedIn, I love Instagram, and I love Facebook. So any of
Cool.
those places, again, it's the number four and the letter U after my name. So
Brilliant.
um, find me in any of those places.
Love it, love it. Hey, thank you. It's been a great conversation. It's interesting when we talk to people on the other side of the world how the world is so small because we have very similar things in common and similar challenges. So thank you for being a connection here on LinkedIn, and certainly thank you for being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Darren.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.